Jean mute, and we will start out with Jean.
Hello, like I said, I'm Jeannie. I'm from Saginaw. I came in about 10 years ago, about the time you left. So it's a new area for me, and I have written a nonfiction piece, a personal memoir called Riding Slow-Handed. Randy and I were lucky to connect before COVID forced lockdowns and remote computing jobs. So we commuted between our homes, creating our own bubble and shutting out the world, until spring stir craziness turned our minds outward. Then we imagined a long gray ribbon stretching miles through the countryside, not a road, a bike trail. Michigan boasts miles of railroad tracks morphed into paved bike trails with amenities like benches and toilets. Perfect, but for a couple problems. I hadn't ridden a bike in a decade or more, though an ancient cruiser gifted to me by a friend hid in my garage because riding alone through my city neighborhood had seemed dicey. Randy was bikeless because he'd lent his 10-speed to a carless worker needing transportation. One day, the friend and a car collided. The rider made it. The bike didn't. When we tried to buy bikes, we couldn't find any for less than $1,000 because it appeared everyone had the same idea. I imagined bicycles stranded in shipping containers off the West Coast. I glowered at bikes used as lawn ornaments. A couple weeks later, Randy's neighbor offered him a 10-speed. It needed repairs, and a local bike shop was still open because essential. I certainly considered it crucial to our sanity at that point. As a child and teen, I'd spent hours riding my green Schwinn no speed around my suburban development. But now I no longer had the slender shape and iron legs of my younger self or the sense of balance that made for riding no-handed. While we waited for UPS to deliver a bike rack, we got our bike legs riding the neighborhood streets, and to escape traffic, a historic cemetery. The crown on the distressed asphalt, the mold from the flood caused by a burst dam, and the reminder of death as COVID surge quickly chased us out. When we finally hoisted our bikes off the rack at the nearest bike trailhead, we were ready for action. The ribbon of trail stretched ahead and flowed behind us. We found ourselves unwinding the years, whooping like kids as we rode side by side. Randy had been a social rider as a kid, hanging out with a pack of neighborhood boys on bikes. They'd done stunts and ridden around the city. I lived too far from town to get anywhere by bike, and I was a solitary rider. So Randy became the biking friend I'd never had, and to him, I became one of the guys. On the trail, we were the old fogies, the ones riders on thin, tired racing bikes with toe clips sped past while calling left. We didn't care. We enjoyed the sunshine and the hedgerow scenery, wild bergamot and compass flowers, sparrows and wrens, territorial chipmunks darting across the trail. After a few outings, we became the riders calling out left to walkers and skateboarders. We were hooked. Soon we researched other trails and one day enjoyed a seldom used one north of us. It was not in great shape, but the bridges over the river and the scenery along it made up for the potholes. That day we saw many more egrets and frogs than we did people. Of the few we did see was an elderly man fishing from a bench built into a bridge railing. A small brown and white terrier dozed in a cage above his rear bike wheel. On our ride back past this fisherman, we masked up to say hello. We learned this terrier was a fierce muskrat hunter and the man's best friend. They've been enjoying this fishing spot for years. Randy and I rode through summer into fall. The amber alder leaves and crimson Virginia creeper on tree trunks mimicked a child's crayon drawings. Flocks of mallards and starlings flew south. The earthy scent of decaying leaves and wild grape raisins reminded us that our trail time would soon end. So, one Saturday we started midway on our customary trail. Our goal? Ride to the end and buy ice cream cones at the shop Randy remembered from when his legs were young enough to pedal the entire trail both ways. We retraced his nostalgic trip, buying waffle cones on the last day the shop was open. When rain clouds chased us back, we broke our record time in what we hoped would be the first of many seasons. Thank you.
Thank you, Jean. That was very, very enjoyable. Is Carrie with us, or did she still not make it?
I am with you. I'm sorry,
you
I
are.
was having trouble with my connection.
Oh, all right. All right. Okay. Well, you are our next reader. Is that okay? And
Yes,
then,
it is. And
I'm
I
glad- I'm-
apologize for, I mean, I planned my whole day around this. And then I couldn't believe I couldn't get on. So, all right.
I'm really glad that I just want to mention to everyone that in the upper, well, I haven't whatever, I have a PC, but it's in the upper right of my screen, I can change the view to speaker view, so I can see the person that's clearly reading in a large frame instead of the gallery view. So you can feel free to do that too. And Carrie, all I asked was that each reader would introduce themselves, tell us where they're at right now, you know, physically, and then tell us what you're going to read, whether it's poetry or prose, and just to give us a brief preview of whether it's fiction, nonfiction, essay, whatever. And with that, I'll mute myself.
Okay. Thank you, Greta. My name is Carrie Sharp. Carrie Cantalupo Sharp is my pen name. Cantalupo is my maiden name. I am in Maple City. I've been writing for a long time, and actually I read a couple years ago in Oliver, and it was wonderful. So I have 3 short poems. The first one is Ice Cream Moon. Hiding in the notions aisle, she had a perfect view of him, a crisp paper hat, muscular arms scoop ice cream cones or generous plop in a tall glass, root beer foam, a silver spoon. She couldn't move to the counter, sit on a red vinyl stool, look into those blue eyes and order. She just lingered, lightly touching pipe cleaners, bandana stacks, sewing kits, heart fizzy, face warm. Love could be that way. She knew early on that random and surprising, not always reciprocated. It isn't until many years later she takes chances, makes internet connections, her gray hair in a braid, wears flowered skirts to music festivals, dancing with the twirl under the moon, a perfect vanilla curl. The next one is called The Hods. And a hat is a gardening basket. This morning, my daughter made peanut butter chocolate chip cookies. I painted a watercolor card for Kim and Tom, thanking them in advance for letting us pick asparagus from their feral field. The cherry orchards are in full bloom, and we drove behind a farm tractor, enjoying the slow retreat through Bohemian Valley. We brought my old hod baskets. They smell of sweetgrass, filled with dirt-heavy roots or cobs of dusty corn. They have been sprayed down with hoses many times. They've moved twice to new homes, have carried strawberries, morels, and wild ramps. Audrey and her brother have swung the hods over their heads tossed in the air to see them arc like rainbows. These are the things I wonder. Will Audrey remember this morning with fondness, our bending, slow move through the field, talking about recipes and her new boyfriend? Will she someday, while going through my garden bench, grab this hod, inhale deeply the sweet grassy smell, feel the rough handle in her palm? Will she think, ah, yes, asparagus? And then the last one is called Paper Dolls. We lay on our stomachs in the driveway, drew house floor plans in chalk, winding garden paths with built-in swimming pools. A new storyline every day, managing imaginary households, the bees drowsy in the afternoon sun. With paper dolls, Snow White could become Shirley Temple, Cinderella a housewife with a Donna Reed apron, so many outfits, gowns, swimsuits, house dresses. Boys were fathers, brothers became butlers, silent providers, handsome, gallant silhouettes, boots and fedoras, cared for, answered to by the females. At night, all the dolls were kept in a Tom McCann shoebox, carefully stacked, careful not to crease their limbs. All the boys and girls equal. Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie. That was great. Next is Paul Maxwell.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, I'm coming to you from Traverse City, from my home. I live right in the city. And I've actually been reading at Oliver Arts Center for the fall and the spring reads for, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 years or 4 years now. And I really missed it last year, like I'm sure a lot of you did. The first two, I'm going to read 3 poems. The first 2 are poems I probably would have read had we had face-to-face last year, and I just saved them. And the third poem is one I've been working on more recently, although all of them I've done some revision recently. The first poem is really, it's written as a poem, but it's also got an element of a story to it. And it's fiction, it's not memoir, it's not really about me particularly, it's about memories that spurred this writing from back when I was about 18 years old. The first poem is called Summer's End. We walked out of the movie theater on a late summer evening amid a heavy downpour of rain with rumbles of thunder. Standing under the marquee, we watched the crowd disperse as water rushed into the gutter. Splashes of oil, yellow, orange, and green, glistened on the street and flowed away in narrow rivulets like sand through an hourglass. Our hands came together as we ran down the street, and we laughed out loud while ducking into an ice cream shop, joyful in the celebration of rain and the suspension of time. We sat by the window, dug into bowls of ice cream, and watched the rain pour down outside, our hair and clothes still drenched, my shirt back plastered to my skin, droplets of water on her forehead and eyelashes. She was excited to be leaving for college in the morning and wondered would I remember to write her. Her words seemed to come from far away, faint sounds, hard to hold on to amid the downpour. I could not keep my eyes off her face, her brown eyes, her lips, the small smear of ice cream in the corner of her mouth. When I parked outside her house, our lips met in a long kiss that tasted of cherries and chocolate and the promise of more. But then she opened the door and stepped out. It was all so sudden, so final. As she walked up to the porch, her mother appeared in the window, peering out at the car, waiting. The rain ceased. I opened the window and pulled away slowly. The smell of fresh cut grass, wet pavement, and a hint of autumn coming in with the evening air. I took the long way home, back roads through the countryside, in no hurry to be anywhere. I drove into the high school parking lot and took a spin around the grounds. All was quiet. A few kids were throwing a football, but I did not know them. The bleachers sat empty and the scoreboard was dark. I punched it and threw gravel as I entered back onto the road. My own community college classes were starting. It wouldn't be like going away to a university, but still I wanted to do well. And while at the library to study, maybe I would write a letter or two. As I reached home, there were thin streaks of red and orange low in the sky where the dark clouds had broken up. Starlings swarmed on tree limbs and power lines, and crickets started a chorus of chirping. This second poem is more of just an experiential poem that I rely on many, many years of memories. My favorite hobby in the summer is I'm a trout fisherman and I spend a lot of time on rivers. I'm a fly fisherman. And this is kind of a compilation of a lot of my thoughts about that. This poem is titled Almost Dark. In summer, during a warm spell, near the end of the day, the big trout come out from hiding. They move out from undercut banks, log jams, and deep holes. They swim to shallower water, on the lookout for insects, minnows, crayfish, and mice. Bats appear, fluttering over the river from tree to tree, feeding on mosquitoes, caddis, and mayflies. They can have all the mosquitoes they want for all I care, and black flies that bite along the forehead and around the ears. They are especially welcome to have them all. But I hope they spare the fireflies, little flashes of light dancing midair in the darkening woods, illuminating the border between forest and meadow, the river and its cedar-lined banks, filling me with heightened expectancy for a good hatch and rising trout, and reminding me of blinking lights strung outside of homes at Christmas time. Other creatures come out. Mink, muskrats, and beavers swim along the riverbank. Deer come in the evening to take a drink. Large owls perch in treetops and hoot. Once one swooped close overhead, giving me a shiver with the whoosh of its long wings. But it is those big trout I am most interested in. After sunset, when streaks of yellow, orange, and pink paint the western sky, and the surface of the river takes on a silvery glow. Seeing a trout take a mayfly on the surface with an audible slurp and leaving a large ring on the water quickens the blood and gets my full attention. That vision and the murmur of the river keeps me up at night. Okay, my third poem is more recently one that I've been working on, and it's informed by really sketchy memories of when I was about 5 years old. And then my parents would take us down to the family farm where my mom was raised. And it's kind of inspired by my mom, I guess, because it's about her, but it's about other things, I guess, I'm trying to, experience. Anyway, this poem is called Roses. How can one account for the passage of time, the moments of experience that live on in memory and visit us unexpectedly? In my backyard grows a tough, unruly rose bush. It has survived being uprooted and moved 3 times, freezing winters and hot, dry summers. But each spring brings new life. First the cane shoots, green leaves, and then a profusion of red roses, which continue all summer, even when I neglect to snip the rose hips. My mother, born a decade before the Great Depression, grew up in mid-Michigan near a village named Rosebush, part of a large Irish family that worked the land, growing corn and raising sheep and cattle. Her parents, the children of immigrants, built a life there, dreaming that their own children would one day move up and out into the world. I imagine Mom as a young girl walking to the privy on a cool, crisp morning when the day felt new, gathering eggs in the hen house, the hens loudly protesting, ruffling feathers and running about, sending plumes of dust rising in shafts of light to the rafters. Then later in the kitchen, peeling potatoes and washing snap beans with her mother and sisters, while her brothers stored bales of hay in the loft of the barn. She did not care for shearing season, was frightened by the sharp shears, the rough handling of the sheep, their helpless bleating. Nor did she like holding a struggling chicken over a stump of wood, not an easy task, its head hanging over, her mother swinging the axe, blood spattering, the chicken running out of her grasp. She told her stories as she worked in her own kitchen, raising her own family. She could bake or cook nearly anything without consulting a recipe. The farm girl, always a part of her, strong, resilient, able to endure many trials. Mom has been gone 30 years now. The farm sold off long ago, but its house and barns still stand, visible from the highway as I drive by, custodians of family lore, now almost lost. There is a soft spot in my heart for this rose bush in the yard. I look forward each spring to the first red blooms. It has survived these same 30 years and will likely be growing here long after I am gone. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much, Paul. That was great. Next we have Kevin, and Kevin's gonna do something special for us.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? I can't hear you guys. Can you hear me?
Can everyone hear Kevin, or not so great? No, I guess not.
No.
No, I can hear that.
Okay, you can hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
This is a love poem, first one I ever wrote about my ever-ending and never-ending sweetheart, out of Benzie County. She moved in shortly after the first ice age. Her name is Crystal Lake. Up and down. Huh? Okay, hold on. How about now?
Much better.
Okay, I tried to take this directly into the computer and it didn't work, so it's a little better sound that way. Anyway, I wrote this song about Crystal Lake, and I put it to music, and I'd love to share it with you. I'm out of Traverse City, Michigan. Thanks for the invite. First time here. Northern winds and crystal water, hardwood hill and the sleeping bear, birchwood tree with the wind on the water. Northern lights, won't you carry me there, lifting me up in your shimmering hair and take me home. Take me home, carry me home, carry me home, carry me home, carry me home. Moonlight walked in a path on the water, my heart so full that I just didn't care. I spent that night out weeping with the willows. Northern lights, won't you carry me there, lifting me up in your shimmering hair. Take me home, oh, take me home, yeah. Carry me home, carry me home, carry me home, carry me home. Thunderhead rising way over yonder, majestic and still in the twilight sky. Sweet quiet scent of rain on the treetops. Northern lights, won't you carry me there, lifting me up in your shimmering hair and take me home. Take me home, carry me home, carry me home, carry me home, carry me home. I could not see the wind or the face of God, but I could feel them both pulling through my sails, driving me into uncharted waters, deep within the mystery. Northern lights, won't you carry me there, lifting me up in your shimmering hair. Take me home, take me home, won't you carry me, take me home, carry me home, carry me home, carry me home, carry me home. The dunes were our bed and the stars were our covers. Sweet were the kisses from my very first love. Tender were the tears at the end of the summer when we said goodbye. Carry me there, carry me there, to the place where I belong. Carry me there, carry me there, to the place where I belong. Got a poem for you. Just one, very short. Called Lakes and Trees. I've noticed that trees are very aware and polite. That's why they set aside their conversations when noisy humans show up. If you are patient and can quiet your soul long enough, the stories they share will amaze. Lakes, on the other hand, rarely shut up. They are either murmuring love poems along the shore or roaring like drunken Irish sailors on leave. God, how I love them. On the rare nights when lakes reflect the heavens without so much as a ripple on their skin, you can see their dreams and they can see yours.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Kevin. Really enjoyed that. What I want to do right now is just make a small change in the lineup, if you don't mind. Bob Mcquilkin has let me know that he has another Zoom at 7. Like, you know, why anybody needs more than one Zoom a day is a mystery to me. But if you don't mind, Nancy, I'd like to let Bob go ahead and read, and then you can follow him if that's all right with you. And Paul, you need to mute.
I'm Bob Mcquilkin, live in Frankfurt and have retired here. Been here for 21 years and been a part of the poetry group. Enjoyed that. Got me started to do something that became a passion. I really respond to issues that are happening in our lives. I'm working on a book called What's on Your Mind. And so here's some of what's on my mind about the pandemic. The promises have been made, and believers have seen a light visible at the end of the crawl space in which they feel trapped by the frightening and threatening pandemic, taking lives like a tsunami, surprising the ones who trusted they were protected ones when serious danger surrounded them. Believing prompts the rise of expectations of what is to come, stirs the hope, and the promises can be trusted to deliver rescue or escape from the growing wave of fear, of suffering, of our mortality, from which everyone is trying to crawl. A season of waiting and worry as time tests our patience and persistence, in trusting the promises of a cure, thought and through the preventive protection developed swiftly by competent scientists in their laboratories all over the world. The day will come when the promise of healing will begin restoring the health of a nation. I also respond to the January 6th event. It will take time. It is what it is, but it's not over till it's over. Patience will be needed. The slow passage of time to render judgment on the consequences of what has taken place. The date surely will go down in history. January 6th. Attack on the Capitol. The one who wrote the script, who staged the event, encouraged what took place, was acquitted of wrongdoing. Incredulous. Not the truth. The man was responsible, guilty. And it will take time for truth to have its impact. But time will tell. Story continues to be made in all the events yet to be. This tragedy has not ended. It is just the beginning, not the beginning. It is just the end of the beginning, not the beginning of the end. The mind of cultures will be changing as more light shines in the dark. It takes many blows from a handheld hammer to secure the nail bonding the integrity of democracy to the platform of tomorrow. Good coffee is brewed drip by drip. A destiny is reached mile by mile. No need to hurry, no need to worry. We will know more in the time to come. With patience, the job will get done. Don't give up. And one more is a poem. I like to write poems that rhyme once in a while, but those are challenging. And sometimes you're forced to put words that don't fit. But I thought of this when I was humming the tune of the Rose. To be grateful when you're lonely, when life's troubles make you sad. To be grateful for in life's sorrows, finding moments that make you glad. Just remember in the darkness, somewhere the sun is shining bright. There's a gift in quiet waiting. Be patient and find the light. There's a promise of our healing. There's a promise in finding hope. There's a promise of God's presence as we gather strength to cope. Just remember in your sadness that you are not alone. There are gifts of love and kindness in the shadows to be known. I'm grateful for the blessings hidden in the family call. I'm grateful for the kindness of people helping one and all. Just remember in the sorrow, there is always one who cares. That trust, that peace and love will follow. There's a presence in our prayers. That's it. Thank you.
Whoops, I didn't. Thank you, Bob. And please enjoy some dinner on the way to your next Zoom. And you can check back in and when we have something available for the recording of this, if you'd like to share it with your family or anyone else.
Thank you. Yeah.
We'll send you a link. And I think
I'm going to stick around.
Okay. Nancy, are you still here?
She seems to have disappeared.
Yeah, she does seem to have disappeared. Okay, Camille. Well, I don't know if she got mad at us or what, but that makes you next. So
okay.
Please introduce yourself. Oh, here she is. Wait a minute.
Oh, good.
Hold up. Okay, Nancy, you're on. There
So
she is.
I have two very short prose pieces. One I wrote for a drawing class with Elizabeth, and I forget her last name. I'm sorry. She was an amazing teacher. She asked us to read something about the process of drawing. So this is called Stay on the trail, control the line. Do you need to see me or what? I'm afraid to touch anything, so I'm just going to go on. I started skiing without lessons as a teenager. What I learned was to go really fast and hope for the best. I started drawing without lessons and also made drawings really fast and hoped for the best. In both cases, all I thought about was the outcome, skiing. I hoped not to break my neck or keep my friends waiting. Drawing, I wanted the finished product to look really professional right away. I just wanted it to look good. 2 years ago, in my 6th decade, I took 3 beginner skiing lessons. I learned to slow down, to look down the hill where I was going and follow my eyes. I learned to slow down and ski in control. Many years after many drawings, I am taking drawing lessons that ask me to slow down and concentrate my eyes on the trail immediately ahead. Just like skiing, when I speed up, I lose control. When I speed up, I get lost on the trail. And the next one is a short piece that I wrote, a true story, for the writing competition at Storm Cloud. And I think that it was about a release of a new beer. And I think it was called A Long Way to Shore. And that was what we were supposed to be writing about. So this is called It Was a Long Way to Shore. The family boarded the ferry in Wisconsin en route to Frankfurt, following a visit with Grandma and the aunties, her 3 spinster sisters, in Chicago. It was a sunny, bright day with billowing clouds that Nancy called Michigan clouds. The engines were rumbling, creating a vibration under the seats on the deck. As they left the pier and entered into the open water of Lake Michigan, the temperature dropped despite the bright sunshine. Nancy, here, put your sweater on, her mother said, looking around for her son and husband. Nancy's brother, distancing himself from his sister so he could feel way older, although it was only a separation of 18 months, was at the rail on the opposite side of the deck. His mother joined him and her husband, leaving Nancy alone on the bench. At about the time the ferry was midway between Wisconsin and Frankfurt, Nancy appeared at her mother's side with an alarmed look on her face. Mama, Mama, tugging on her jacket. Johnny just fell overboard. Where? When? Just now back there, she said, pointing to the stern. Her mother looks aft, thinking to herself, oh my God, we're going to have to turn this boat around. But Nancy just wandered off looking for her brother. Johnny was Nancy's imaginary friend who had been her constant companion for a number of years and was taken very seriously in the family. Visitors to the home could not sit in a chair occupied by Johnny. He accompanied Nancy everywhere. So to Nancy's mother, this seemed a serious matter. But her daughter seemed to be taking this event in stride. So the boat did not have to be turned around and Johnny was never mentioned again. And telling the story years later, her mother would say, so that's how she got rid of Johnny. I hope her future boyfriends don't all have the same fate. Mostly they did. They all went overboard except one. That's it.
Okay, thank you, Nancy. I'm glad we were able to make that small change and appreciated that last story especially.
I had no problem with the change. I'm sorry I got so screwed up with my thing here. Never mind. I've been enjoying this very much.
I'm glad. Well, it happens to all of us. Okay, next is Camille.
Hi, everybody. Again, I apologize for my broken camera, but I'm from Frankfurt. I've been part of the poetry group for, I lost track, but I think it's been 4 years. We've missed each other the last year. And I'm going to read a very short little piece of nonfiction called Messenger. I have heard it said that after our loved ones die, they can help us in ways they couldn't when here on earth. Yet, Sometimes it takes a while to perceive what might be unfolding. This past spring, 27 years after it began, and while out on the birding trail, I realized it was time to tell this story. Come on, you gotta hear this. David was always playing the trickster. Still, a couple of us stopped setting up camp on the Russian River and followed him to the edge of a clearing in the woods. As he gestured toward the treetops, we listened. At first, nothing. Then, off in the distance, an otherworldly, crystalline sound. Is this some kind of trick? We wondered, glancing at each other quizzically. This was, after all, David of the practical jokes. David, our classmate, who, early one morning, draped the classroom with black balloons and crepe paper on my birthday to make the point of how very much older I was than he. Dear David, who, at 35, was amused to learn that he was an entire 7 months to the day younger than me. But here in this wood, this was something different. We listened intently. Then we heard it again. It's a hermit thrush, he exclaimed finally. I'd heard of the little rufous bird before, but had never actually seen one nor heard its song. The notes went up and then spiraled down the scale like a flute or a penny whistle, and then trailed off as if making its own echo. We stood there taking in the ethereal sound until we were convinced it was real. They call it a hermit thrush because they're so hard to spot. But isn't that an incredible song? Said David, so in love with birds. The gossamer tune infused my whole being with wonder. How could such a heavenly sound exist on earth? It floated up through the leaves of the trees so delicately, it was beyond capture. Still, the more I heard, the more I perceived of the song's rhythm. It began with a single note, followed by a cascade of descending notes, as if he were saying, "But I might have something to tell you." I wanted to stay and listen, but dusk was upon us and fires needed to be made back in camp. That was Sonoma County, California, in the spring of 1993. Though 20 years and more would pass before I would hear it again, I would never forget that birdsong. David passed away in December of 2015. In the spring of 2016, I was hiking in the woods near my home back in Michigan when I first caught sound of it again. Like that first time, it was evening, not quite dusk, at the end of a long spring day, and it was unmistakable. The song rang more closely this time, but not a glimpse of the elusive hermit would I catch. I remember thinking, "Is that you, David?" He had loved birds so, it would be no surprise if he would convey his presence through a winged one. To finally hear that particular bird song again after 23 years caught me off guard. I placed my hand on my heart and sucked in my breath. I felt as if someone were saying, "Pay attention here, there's a message coming through." But time in the spirit world doesn't necessarily correspond to time on earth. The significance of an otherworldly event can be revealed in the moment or yet be a long way off. I would need to be patient and attentive and trust in the process. The following year, I was walking the beach with a man I had recently met when the topic turned to birding. "Have you ever heard a hermit thrush?" I asked him. He looked stunned. "The hermit thrush is my favorite bird," he said, adding, "I can take you where we'll hear one." And so he has, again and again, to the winding path of a chestnut wood, now our favorite birding trail. Thank you.
We're all clapping.
Hmm.
Okay, next up is Peter.
All right, thank you. Thank you. This is my first time here, so thank you for inviting me. I'm Peter Bergen. I'm a musician. I live near Lake Ann. And I have a couple poems here based on recollections of living near a lake when my kids were young. They're still young, but when they were really young. The first one here is called Lester. 3 parallel planks, rigid above gray waters, furrowed and scarred by cruel ice and heat, softened by falling fresh feet, caretaker of confessions cast, true at last. Its owner was a man whose smile had the power to render his 91 birthdays invisible. Nothing I like more than watching a boy fish, was all the young ones needed to hear. Their father knew well of summer's imprint upon young minds, yet less about casting a line, setting a hook, gutting a fish on an altar for anglers. Still, this father knew enough to heed the narrow lane and tall oaks leading to Lester's smile. Knew enough to let children do as they do with an old man's dock. Day transfigures into dusk, blush bleeding to celeste, into azure, now into ebony, an unrehearsed duet with silence so deep it presses upon face and ear. I wink at my daughter, finger across beaming smile. We know this music. We nod and understand. The silent symphony soars from soil to star. And here's a related poem called Swans. Some days I'd see swans on the lake in full regalia, shiny coats, orange badges. To most, a reminder of nature's marvel. To Lester, anathema to his beloved loons. So off Lester would go, chasing, scattering, muttering, waving. A berserk icebreaker with singular intent. The swans didn't stand a chance against his outboard motor. For a time, the swans found solace on the far side of the lake, but recently, with Lester's passing, I noticed them again in their rightful places. I see one accosting my boat, its neck and beak leveled with singular intent. I think about rightful places and move off. It seems like I'm always pushing pieces around, juggling wishes against my deepest desires, seeking a veil of satisfaction. I wonder how it might be if I were more like the swans and the fish and the water that surround me. Looking back, the swan has submerged. Maybe it has found something. Lester always told me the perch there is best. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Those are some really great outdoor, plus childhood. Very nice combination. Thank you. Pat, you're up next. I'm so glad we were able to rescue you from cyber detention.
Okay. It's good to be here, Greta. It's nice to see you. I'm really enjoying everybody's piece. So my name is Pat Holmes. I live in Benzonia. And this piece is from a memoir that I just published this year. How about that? So anybody wants a copy? And it's called Hunt Dunk. If anyone's familiar with English fox hunting, that's what I was doing in Metamora when this event occurred. It was an exciting ride through fields and trails on my trusty Beau Rouge. He stands at 15, 16 hands high at the withers, which is about 5 feet. When I purchased him, the trainer described him as an honest horse. One never knows when those best qualities will be critical. A group of experienced riders were at a river crossing. They hollered, "Stay to your right," with some anxiety. Jane in front of me walked her horse into the water and I followed. My horse was coming up too close behind her and I pulled him up. "Stay in the weeds," I heard as I entered the open water beside her. Warren, an experienced rider of many years, waved me to the left and hollered the loudest a second and third time, "Go left." I figured weeds must be okay on either side, so rather than circling my horse to slow him, I took to the left. Beau started to sink. He is a steady animal that doesn't panic. He continued to attempt to gain his footing, but his quick movements told me he was having a problem. He was up to his belly in churned up mud. Jane had proceeded to get out of the weeds safely. Beau couldn't get control and sank further, and I was soon wet up to the top of my knee-high boots. I gave him plenty of rain not to interfere with his struggle, but he sank further. The water was up to his back and he was paddling, trying to get somewhere or gain some footing. He raised his front legs high, but couldn't make any headway. He started leaning to one side. Then I found myself leaning to the opposite to stay on. I realized he was practically floating on his side. It was time to bail out. I figured I couldn't get much more wet than I was already, so that wouldn't make much difference. As I let go of the reins and spread my arms, I felt the shock of the late September cold water coming up my torso. I can feel it in my throat, maybe. I brought one leg across his back, but the other leg was under him. He was stepping out higher and farther, attempting to gain footing. As I saw his hoofs near me with great strength, that would help. My senses said, "Get out of the way." One hoof struck my arm. That hurt. I tried to get clear of him, but my foot was secured in the stirrup. I pulled and pulled, but I was on my back floating, and I couldn't get my foot free from under him. I pulled and shook some more while Beau struggled. I imagined him getting out, dragging me through the water, and kicked really fiercely until I got free. I was in the weeds when Beau found his way out as he gained footing. I swam a few strokes, gaining some distance, until my feet touched ground. Judy, whom I didn't know, caught Beau and was holding him. Soon the water was below my waist as I walked out, then to my thighs, and finally on solid footing and out of the water. "You lost a stirrup," Judy reported. "Doesn't bother me, I'm glad it's gone." My foot was caught. The entire stirrup leather had pulled away from the saddle. What I remember most today was the ride home, which took over an hour. With wet clothes and wind wicking any body heat away, my temperature was steadily dropping. I struggled to stay alert, to avoid confusion. A canter was too fast as the cold was unbearable. A walk was too slow as I had to get out of the wet clothes and get warm soon. At a steady trot, I relied on my best friend, whom I loved, to get me home safely, which, of course, he did.
That was very exciting and scary. And I'm really glad you shared it with us.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Pat. Next we have Hadley.
Hi, thank you. My name is Hadley Moore. I live near Kalamazoo, and I am a native of Manistee. I'm going to read just the very first part of a longer story called The Entomologist, which appears in my book, Not Dead Yet, and other stories. I write fiction. Earlier today, the hippies had ambushed Lynette, and in the hours since they left, she'd been off kilter, lost in a vacant sort of perseverating that came down to feeling humiliated and not knowing how to soothe herself. She guessed the hippies had tried the broken bell first. Then they knocked while she was in the bathroom, and she'd hoped she could hold her breath and wait them out. But they knocked again. She debated whether to flush, decided against it, and crept from the back of the house up the hall, at the end of which she saw a man's face pressed to the wide front window. He waved. She considered running out the back, but he might chase her. She couldn't remember if she'd locked the front door, and it seemed safest to meet him on the porch where the neighbors could hear her scream. She opened the door. Yes, she said. There were two of them, the man and a woman. They were skinny as new trees, and though their clothes were shapeless, they had bathed and combed their hair. Portland was lousy with vagrant youths. Hippies was probably an old-fashioned word, but these two appeared neither sinister nor pathetic. Even so, Lynette reminded herself to keep her guard up. Yes, she said again. I'm Antoine, the man said. Lynette crossed her arms. And I'm Caddy, said the woman. Caddy? Lynette repeated. The woman smiled. It's a nickname that stuck. The man went on. Like Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. Huh, Lynette said. She pulled the door shut behind her and took a step forward. Antoine and Caddy took a step back. We're from Oregon Micro Farms, Antoine said. Have you heard of it? Lynette stared at him. We notice you have a chunk of unused land. What? Behind the house. You mean my yard? It's a full quarter acre, and it's mostly empty. What do you want? Lynette asked. She tried to sound impatient, but the sun lit Antoine's white blonde hair. You have a halo, she told him. Excuse me? Oh, not a halo, like nimbus or something, of light. Lynette drew an imaginary circle around the top of her head and pointed behind them. They looked. The house faces west, she said. So, your hair. It was 4 o'clock on a March day in Portland. Oh, Caddy said. Her hair was black. Antoine touched his head. He and Caddy glanced at each other. You must have lovely sunsets, he said. The backyard faces east, which would give us enough light, and we could use this south-facing side yard, too. Caddy pointed. They talked, and Lynette watched their mouths. Antoine's head still blazed, and the colors in their clothes pulsed. First the orange flowers of Caddy's floppy sweater, then the blue of Antoine's jeans. Lynette felt heat begin in her solar plexus. She wiped her upper lip. Something, Oregon Micro Farms, they said. Something, vegetables. Something, raised beds. That phrase over and over. Raised beds. I'm Lynette. They stopped talking. Anyway, Antoine said, can we show you what we mean? That was how she ended up in the backyard with the hippies. All three of them assuming the posture of the surveyor, wide stance, hands on hips. Antoine and Caddy would build raised beds on her land. They would start tomorrow, and maybe also plant a few hardy fruit trees. Some of the food they would donate to shelters and soup kitchens, and some they would sell at farmers markets to benefit Oregon Micro Farms. They would get to keep a little for themselves. It was part of the contract, and they would give a little bit to Lynette. I'm allergic to cucumbers. Got it, said Caddy. Is this your job? Lynette asked. Partly. I nanny, and Antoine works in a coffee shop. Everyone in Portland works in a coffee shop. Lynette laughed. Of course, I love coffee. Antoine smoothed his beard. It was darker than his hair. What do you do? He asked. I study termites. Studied them. I'm retired. That surprised them. They thought she was a nutty old lady, but she had a master's degree in entomology. Interesting, Antoine said. Study them for what purpose? I know they're helpful for decomposition in some ecosystems. Lynette guffawed. Like decomposing the ecosystem of your house. They gave her tiny fake smiles. I worked for a pesticide company. The grudging smiles persisted, but Lynette knew she had said too much. The heat began again, and she fanned her face. She was embarrassed because, for one, the hippies didn't believe in pesticides, and for two, the termites were back. Thank you.
I can't wait to read the rest of that story. Can you put some info about your book in the chat, please? Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, I can't. It's really intriguing beginning. Okay, next up, Marcy.
Okay. First of all, I'm very happy to be here and I've enjoyed everybody's reading. I would like to make comments, but seems like every time I touch something, I goof something else up. So I'm afraid to do that. But in any case, I have 3 poems and the first one is the requisite pandemic poem, and it's called Over the Rainbow. It's easier to dig out ingredients for Cape Breton bread, pretend I have to stay home while it rises twice. It's easier to imagine I have a deadline for knitting projects that glue me to my chair beneath the bright lamp. It's easier to hope my downstate family is staying home, not reporting for their essential jobs, than to comprehend pandemic reality. It's folly, perhaps, to think I can keep my already ill husband safe, to believe hand sanitizing and masks are foolproof, that the virus will get caught or killed by these small defenders. But when I go to bed, read as I always do, turn off the light and slide beneath the quilt, I can almost see life as it has always been, normal, sometimes solitary, but safe, abundant with human contact, hugs and handshakes. The second one is a form poem called an anaphora. And in anaphora, you see rhyme and also a repetition of lines, or an almost exact repetition of lines. This one is called The Tree Called Life. And the real tree, called the Tree of Life, is ancient, grows beside the Jordan River, and its roots, because it's so dry in that area, the roots come up toward the surface looking for water, and you can see them on both sides of the river. Okay, the tree called life. At home, a shy girl waiting, budding woman dating, loving young wife mating to make life. And here a newborn flailing, nearby a toddler wailing, frazzled mom not sailing through her life. Restless wife deceiving, saddened husband leaving, one more couple grieving their lost life. Teenage child lying, the son an addict buying, anguished mother crying for his life. Another missile sighting, distant country fighting, violent war igniting to steal life. The tree called life still growing, its roots on both banks showing, at the Jordan River flowing, swift to save our lives. And the last one is a little lighter one. I wrote this for Poets Night Out several years ago, and it's called Staging the House. We don't brush our teeth or take ring-making baths. We don't place dirty shoes in our used-to-be mudroom. We tuck away all pictures that remind us whose we are, where we started, and what we've created. We don't make cream of broccoli soup that boils over no matter how closely we watch, or heat canola oil to odor-emitting temperatures. We write no phone messages or stick grocery lists to the refrigerator. No Post-it notes sit at eye level to nudge our memories. Instead, we swap our messy life, scattered newspapers, weathered paperbacks, unfinished crosswords, for unread coffee table books, stash laundry in the garage, and peel off the plastic tablecloth, replacing it with a tea-dyed doily, smooth beneath a wrought iron bowl of perfect oranges. And when prospects hit the neighborhood, we heat the pot of cinnamon potpourri and lay open the joy of cooking to quiche Lorraine, artfully positioning 3 brown eggs in a porcelain-handled whisk on the counter before we locate our hidden keys and do the skedaddle. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marcy. I saw your reading also for the Poets Night Out for this last year, which was very enjoyable also. So thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
And last but far from least, our visitor all the way from Maryland, Edna.
Hear me because I was asking if you could hear while I was muted. So can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. I used to belong to the Michigan Poetry Society, and I'm realizing how long ago it was, but in any case, I'm happy to be there again. And my name is Edna Gard, and let's see, the picture behind me is one I took on a walk close to where I'm living, and I thought I'd share that. Looks a little better than my the wall behind me. Let's see, what else do I need to tell you? It's this is a prose piece, and it's about something that has been on my mind for a while, and it's called About Labels. And let's see, I'm trying to get on speaker view, but I don't see myself on there. But anyway.
That has to be selected by the other panelists.
Oh, okay.
We put you on speaker view on our.
Yeah, I'm trying to do it on my own, but I guess it doesn't happen, but that's okay. About labels. At last, after a mammoth job organizing my bookshelves, files, and household goods, I've come to finally appreciate the value of categories for things like books and files. Order is a lot more pleasant than chaos. True, a book of short stories by, say, an Irish artist, or an Irish author, excuse me, might present a question as to whether it should be classified as Irish, American, or short stories, but any of those designations should work pretty well. Even if you get it wrong, or if it doesn't quite fit any of your categories, it isn't life-threatening. A book will pretty much stay the same, however you classify it, unless you put it in a damp spot that's subject to mold, or leave it where a frustrated pet can get hold of it if you're late coming home. But other than that, the only thing misplacement can do is make it hard to find. The author might get mad, but the book itself doesn't have any feelings about it, even if it may appear to frown or celebrate from your bookshelf. A book isn't a child. A book doesn't cry out in anger or pain when it's defined negatively by those who care for it or those who don't. Recently, I've heard about several children who were having difficulties defined with specific designations. The term for a troublesome child used to be simply bad. Then it became neurotic. From there, diagnoses have multiplied. This is undoubtedly an improvement, but all too quickly, terms like obsessive compulsive, hyperactive, bipolar, narcissistic, oppositional, and lacking in empathy have become catchphrases. Too often, people ignore the caveat. Of course, it's all a matter of degree, and many symptoms of different conditions are the same. But what does this mean? A book is tangible, but the system we use to classify it isn't an entity. There isn't a category walking around on two legs called art or modern. Categories don't exist in the real world. They're concepts we use to organize our perceptions. That's even more true when it comes to human beings. It's great to have medical definitions. It's important to know the difference between a broken bone, sprained ankle, or a combination of both. It's also good to know if a child is dyslexic. But a person's social and psychological responses can relate to any number of shifting and far-reaching interactions. Facile diagnoses, professional or popular, are dangerous. They can lead to facile prescriptions. They can also become self-fulfilling prophecies. Sometimes it's necessary to forego the comfort of describing people as OCD or ADHD or BPAD or NPD or EDD or ODD. As a retired teacher, I appreciate research that brings increasing accuracy. But at some point, we need to see the difference between superimposed concepts and living realities. I hope we can all see beyond labels to the living, breathing human beings who are limitless and share a universal core of awareness. Thank you.
Thank you, Edna. Everybody can unmute now, and we'll give some closing remarks. First of all, are there any questions that anyone has?
Yes, I have a dumb technical question. For the people who made comments, which I would have liked to have done, how did they do it? I was afraid to touch anything that I'd screwed something up.
There's a chat. If you go down to the bottom of the screen where you mute and unmute.
Oh, I do that at the top.
Oh, okay. You must have an Apple computer. Okay, well then somebody else better answer your question because I have a PC.
It does say,
Just tap where it says ... Do you see
I
that?
think,
for the more?
Yep. And under there it says chat.
Oh, and then, and that's where you put it in the chat?
yeah.
Okay.
And in this meeting, their only option was to make comments to all panelists or to the whole group. But in most other Zooms, you can pick out a recipient if you want to say something to an individual. So yeah.
Well, I enjoyed reading the comments though, so I was glad we all got them.
They've been wonderful, the whole event.
I sure enjoyed listening and appreciate your, putting this together.
Well,
I
it was
tried
a pleasure.
I tried to make a chat. I wrote a chat, but I couldn't figure out how to get it into the chat.
Do you have an Apple or PC?
I have an Apple.
Well, then Peter, I think, just described the way to do that. You want to say that again, Peter?
In the top right, there's a thing that says more with 3 dots. You go there and it'll say chat, and you select that one.
I got the chat, which was actually on my computer on the bottom. It says
Oh.
chat with a little quote thing. And so then it says to at the bottom, and I wrote to. It was about Paul's poetry. I thought was just so beautiful, and I tried to write a thing about that. So when I hit the little 3 dots there, all I get is save chat.
Oh, no, that's not it then. If you go down to the bottom, you must, I don't know. It sounds like if you have an icon that says chat, I think all you need to do is click on that, and then you can add comments into the chat.
I have to hover over the bottom of the photo of you in the screen in order to have the toolbar pop up.
Yeah.
I can
Right.
see chat. That's the thing I had to click on to get chat.
Well,
But it
I
doesn't
do a
show
lot
up
of,
without the cursor being there.
I actually do a lot of Zoom meetings, and with people
Discussion.
who write chats. So I will ask somebody that I do that without such a large group to see if I can find out how to do it. But for some reason, I just got lost. And I didn't tell you that I live in Frankfurt and that I've been coming here my whole life in the summers and then moved here 11 years ago. And I have really enjoyed this, and the writings are amazing. So thank you all very much.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. The other thing is, I wrote this in the chat, but if you want to save the chat on the PC, you go to the 3 dots at the bottom of the chat, click on that, and it says save chat, and you can save it to your computer.
Yeah, but how do you, what I need to find out is how to get it to the panelists so they can read it, because mine never appeared.
Well, the other comment I will make is if you do have any comments you want to make to any of the individuals or to the group as a whole, we did send out emails where everybody was copied and not blind copied. So if you want to send a message to the people that were involved tonight, pretty easy thing to do.
Okay, and my last comment, and then I'll shut up, is that I wish I could eat at Carrie's house.
I love it.
I know a lot of people like that.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Greta.
Oh, my
Yes,
pleasure.
thank
my
you,
pleasure.
Greta.
Yeah, I'm
Maybe in person next time.
Thank
Yes,
you so
that-
much.
yeah, that's what I'm hoping. We do enjoy doing it in person, and we have generally a better audience. So, and then we can go out and have a beer at Storm Cloud. So it's a win-win-win.
Yeah.
That was fun.
Well, it
Thank
was-
you so much.
Thanks, everybody. It's been
Thank you.
wonderful.
We
Good to
will
be here.
follow up
Goodbye.
with the
Thank you.
recording.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Greta, for putting it together.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks,
This
Greta.
is the real
Thank
applause.
you.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
It was a pleasure hearing so much really wonderful writing of all kinds. That was great.
So glad you joined us.
Thank you.